The party that revealed everything I was supposed to be dead. That's what my wife thought when she threw our anniversary party last Saturday. The same anniversary party where I overheard her tell our guests that she was finally free to be herself, now that her boring husband was gone. The problem? I wasn't gone. I was standing in our kitchen, very much alive, listening to my wife of 12 years celebrate my supposed death with champagne and our closest friends. Let me back up. 3 weeks ago, I was in a car accident, bad enough to put me in a coma for 2 weeks, bad enough that the doctors weren't sure I'd wake up. But I did wake up yesterday, and I'd come home early to surprise my wife, only to discover she'd already moved on. If you're into honest stories about relationships, trust and betrayal, hit that follow button. You won't want to miss the next one. From the kitchen, I could hear her voice clearly. I know it sounds terrible, but I feel like I can finally breathe again. Living with Michael was like being slowly suffocated. He was so adequate, so safe, so completely forgettable. The room erupted in understanding murmurs and supportive laughter. These were supposed to be our friends, people who'd known us for years, people who'd attended our wedding, celebrated our anniversaries, who I'd considered family. I mean, I stayed as long as I could, she continued, her voice gaining confidence. But when the accident happened, I realized something. I wasn't devastated. I was relieved, like the universe had finally given me permission to have the life I actually wanted. More laughter, more agreement, more validation for my wife's celebration of my supposed death. And now, someone asked, now I'm selling the house, taking the insurance money, and moving to Costa Rica with Derek. Derek, my brother Derek. The same brother who'd been comforting her during my coma. The same brother who was now apparently funding her escape to Central America with my life insurance payout. I stood in that kitchen, listening to my wife plan her new life with my brother using money from my death, surrounded by friends who thought my disappearance was the best thing that ever happened to her. But here's the thing about being declared dead when you're very much alive. You get to hear exactly what people really think about you. And what I heard that night changed everything. I didn't storm into the room. I didn't confront them. Instead, I quietly slipped out the back door and drove to the one place I knew I could think clearly, my lawyer's office. You see, when someone is presumed dead, their spouse becomes the beneficiary of everything. Life insurance, savings accounts, property deeds, it all transfers over. But when that person isn't actually dead, and their spouse has already started spending that money, it becomes something else entirely. Fraud. By Monday morning, I had everything I needed. Bank records showing she'd already accessed my accounts. Insurance documents showing she'd filed a claim. Real estate listings showing our house was already on the market. Even photos from Derek's social media showing them celebrating together while I was supposedly in the morgue. But the real evidence came from something I'd never expected. A recording. My wife had been so confident in my death that she'd been documenting everything on her phone. Video diaries about her new life, recordings of phone calls with the insurance company, even footage of her and Derek packing up my belongings to donate while keeping anything valuable. In one video, dated 3 days after I woke up, she said, "The funeral was perfect. Michael would have hated it. Too many people, too much emotion." But that's the point. This is about celebrating my freedom, not mourning his boring existence. She'd thrown herself a funeral, for me, while I was recovering in the hospital. That's when I decided to throw myself a different kind of party. I spent Tuesday morning making phone calls to the insurance company to alert them about the fraudulent claim, to the bank to freeze all accounts she'd accessed illegally, to the real estate agent to cancel the house listing she'd initiated without my knowledge. But most importantly, I called everyone who'd been at that anniversary party. "Hi, this is Michael," I said to each of them. "I know this might be shocking, but I'm not actually dead, and I'm throwing a party this Saturday to celebrate being alive. Hope you can make it." The confusion in their voices was immediate and intense. Some hung up thinking it was a cruel prank. Others demanded proof. A few stammered apologies and excuses, but they all agreed to come. Saturday evening arrived, and I was ready. I'd rented the same venue where my wife had celebrated my death, hired the same caterer, even ordered the same flowers. But this party would be very different. The first guests arrived around 7. The look of shock on their faces when they saw me, very much alive, was priceless. Word spread quickly through the room. People were pulling out their phones, calling others, trying to figure out what was happening. My wife arrived at 7:30 with Derek, expecting to find the venue empty so they could pick up some decorations she'd left behind. Instead, she found a room full of people staring at her in stunned silence. And there I was, standing at the front of the room with a microphone in my hand. "Thank you all for coming," I said, watching my wife's face drain of all color. "I know this is unexpected. After all, most of you were at my funeral last week." The room was dead silent. My wife looked like she was going to faint. Derek was backing toward the exit. But as you can see, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. In fact, I've been very much alive this whole time, recovering from my accident while my loving wife and devoted brother planned their new life together using my insurance money. I pulled out my phone and started playing the audio from last week's party. My wife's voice filled the room. "Living with Michael was like being slowly suffocated." People gasped. A few actually covered their mouths in shock. My wife tried to speak, but no words came out. "Now I know what you're thinking," I continued. "How awkward. Here you all are, caught celebrating someone's death while they're standing right in front of you. But don't worry, I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to clear up a few misunderstandings." I gestured to a screen behind me where I'd prepared a slideshow of evidence. First slide, bank records showing my dear wife accessing my accounts while I was in a coma. Second slide, insurance claims filed in my name while I was very much alive. Third slide, real estate documents showing our family home being sold without my knowledge or consent. Each slide was met with more gasps, more shocked murmurs from the crowd. And finally, I said, clicking to the last slide, text messages between my wife and my brother, planning their romantic getaway to Costa Rica, funded entirely by my supposed death. The text messages were explicit, both sexually and financially. They'd been planning this for months, waiting for the perfect opportunity. My accident had just been convenient timing. Derek finally found his voice. "Michael, man, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "You thought I was dead, so you figured you'd cash in. The only problem is, I'm not dead, which makes all of this fraud, insurance fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit theft. Really impressive list of felonies you two have racked up." My wife finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Michael, please, I can explain." "Explain what? How you threw yourself a funeral while I was unconscious? How you've been stealing money from accounts that aren't yours? How you've been planning to disappear to another country with my brother using my life insurance payout?" I looked around the room at all our friends, all the people who'd celebrated my death just a week ago. "But here's the thing I really want you all to understand," I said. "This isn't just about money. This is about someone being so relieved by their spouse's supposed death that they throw a party to celebrate it. This is about someone who spent 12 years pretending to love me while apparently being slowly suffocated by my existence." The room was completely silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. So thank you, all of you, for showing me exactly what my life was worth to the people I thought cared about me. And thank you, dear wife, for being so honest about your feelings when you thought I couldn't hear them. I set down the microphone and walked toward the exit, but turned back one final time. "Oh, and one more thing. The police are waiting outside to discuss those fraudulent insurance claims. Something about how filing a false death claim is a federal offense. But I'm sure you two can work that out with them." As I walked out of that venue, I could hear the chaos erupting behind me. My wife screaming, Derek trying to make excuses, guests whispering and taking photos. It was exactly the kind of scene my wife would have hated. Too much drama, too much emotion. But that wasn't my problem anymore. 3 months later, both my wife and my brother pled guilty to multiple felony charges. She got 18 months in federal prison. He got 2 years. The house stayed mine. The insurance money was returned, and I got to start over completely. But the real revelation wasn't about their crimes. It was about how many people in my life had been secretly relieved by the idea of my death. How many friendships were built on politeness rather than genuine affection. How many relationships I'd been maintaining through effort alone. The accident had given me an unexpected gift, the ability to hear what people really thought about me when they believed I was gone. And what I learned was that some people aren't worth keeping in your life, even if they're willing to pretend otherwise. I moved to a different city, made new friends, started dating someone who's never once described loving me as suffocating. Someone who would be devastated, not relieved, if something happened to me. Sometimes people ask if I regret the public confrontation, if I think it was too dramatic or cruel. I don't. Because my wife had no problem celebrating my death in front of our closest friends. She had no problem stealing my money or planning her future with my brother. She had no problem describing our 12 years of marriage as slow suffocation. All I did was make sure she had to own those choices publicly instead of hiding behind the convenient excuse of my supposed death. The party where I was supposed to be the guest of honor while dead became the party where I was very much alive and finally free. Free from people who saw my existence as an inconvenience. Free from relationships built on obligation rather than genuine care. Free from trying to earn love from people who were secretly hoping I'd disappear. My wife got what she wanted in the end. She's finally free from our marriage. She's just experiencing that freedom from behind bars instead of on a beach in Costa Rica. As for Derek, he learned that betraying family has consequences, especially when you're stupid enough to document your crimes on social media. And me? I learned that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering who you really matter to. It's a short list, but it's an honest one. The difference between being loved and being tolerated is often invisible until someone thinks you're gone. Then you find out exactly where you stood in their world. I'm grateful for that accident now, not because it almost killed me, but because it showed me who I was really living for. And it wasn't the people who celebrated when they thought I was dead. Now I'm living for people who would genuinely mourn my loss, not plan their escape route using my insurance money. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can discover is how little you mean to the wrong people. Because once you know that, you can start focusing on meaning everything to the right ones. The wife who called me boring and forgettable taught me something important. Being boring to someone who finds excitement in fraud and betrayal is actually a compliment. Being forgettable to someone who remembers only what she can steal from you is a blessing. I'm not boring to the right person. I'm not forgettable to someone who actually values what I bring to their life. And unlike my ex-wife, I'll never have to plan a celebration around someone else's death to feel happy about my own life. The party that was supposed to mark my end became the beginning of everything I actually wanted. Sometimes you have to be presumed dead to finally start living. If this story kept you engaged until the end, wait until you hear about the man who discovered his family's grief counseling sessions after his supposed suicide were actually planning meetings for how to spend his inheritance. Hit that subscribe button, because the most shocking betrayals always come from the people who claim to love us most. Trust me, after being declared dead and discovering what that really meant to the people in my life, I've learned that the most dangerous lies are the ones people tell themselves about caring for you. The next story will show you exactly how far people will go when they think you can't witness their true feelings.